You made it to the Go Commando Show with Fred Galvin. On our new mission, we contend with the naked truths of health, leadership, and overcoming adversity. Now it's time to Go Commando.
Hello, Commandos. We have a great show for you today, and a gentleman that I've known for a little over 3 years, since retiring from the Marines and moving back here. He is not only a professional dentist, but he is an entrepreneur, and we're going to talk about a little bit of both. Those challenges, just like everyone faces in their profession, he has gone to the top of them, and it's through applying a lot of discipline and some of these special skills, and it's having some vision where you want to go, and the faith that every single day there's going to be challenges and how to overcome those. So we are going to talk about those, and specifically what he's done in his profession to continue to advance. It's very, very important. We're not going to get in too deep into dentistry. We're going to get into how he arrived at the point where he is at, both through his academic journey as well as his business practices. So without further ado, welcome, Dr. Haake.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Yes. And this is Dr. Stephen Haake. He is a dentist here with Haake Family Dental, and that's here in Johnson County, Kansas. And I'll just give the disclaimer up front, he is my dentist, and one plug, because he's not paying, there's no kind of retribution or compensation for this, but having served a month shy of 27 years in the Marines, when you get to a semi-annual checkup, you're seeing a lot of different dentists. So I've probably seen on the upwards of probably about 50 dentists in my military career. My uncle was a dentist, and so I do have some experience with having a wide variety of dentists. That's what we're going to talk about, is why his business is so impressive, and it led me to ask him, about his business practices. So without further ado, Dr. Haake,
Yes.
What were the steps when you grew up? What led you to want to become a dentist? Did that start early in youth, or was it your family? Or
No, it was it started, growing up I always wanted to do something in health professions that was, I love science, I love biology, I love those kinds of things. So I always knew I wanted to do something in health professions. Physician was what I kind of had in my head.
Yes.
But that didn't always feel right. And it wasn't until later in life when I was in college, that I decided I wanted to be a dentist.
Okay.
So,
Did you have any dentists in your family background?
No dentist, the first dentist in the family.
Oh, wow.
So, yeah.
So it's kind of daunting experience not having anyone to directly in the family to ask those questions on roadmap.
No, and we had some friends of the family that were dentists, so that was nice to have that available when I did decide I wanted to pursue dentistry, to go in there and see what dentistry is actually about, see if this is what I really want to do. So you had great support from friends of the family, so that was nice.
Yes. So growing up, tell us a little bit about your background as far as going to school, sports. Were you always a straight-A student? What type of sports did you play? How competitive were you in order to get where you're at now?
I've always been very competitive, whether it be sports, whether it be academics.
What kind of sports did you play?
I played mostly football.
Yes.
I played basketball. I was just in the city league in high school. I didn't play in high school, but I focused a lot on lifting weights. I just enjoy that. For me, it's a stress release even to this day. But I've always been, golf was another one. But for me, it's one of the things I love about lifting or golf is just the competitive nature I can have with myself.
Right.
A lot of times you hear people talking about be better than you were the day before. Tomorrow will be better than you are today. And I really do try to live by that. And I enjoy things where I can go out there and say, okay, last time I did this, I'm going to try to get better today.
Yes.
And I carry that over into the business, into my dentistry as well. So I evaluate my work. Okay, what could I have done better on this?
Yes. So with your sports, was that a daily, I'm going to give my very best each day, or was it that and you have some long-term goals that I am going to achieve this, lifting this much weight in these types of lifts, a long-term goal with benchmarks?
Well, when I was in high school, it was a lot of, because for football, I mean, you have to, you need to be here, you need to be here. What I did back then, I didn't really realize, I implemented in my business too, is tracking.
Yes.
And that's how I would know I'm doing better.
Recording.
I'm tracking what I'm doing.
Yes.
It's like, okay, last week I was able to complete these lifts. Okay, let's move it up 5 pounds.
Right.
That kind of thing. And I didn't realize that at that time that it's something that, is used,
yes.
in a successful business as well.
Was that something that was shown to you through coaches?
Through coaches, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And were they inspiring as far as, your competitiveness, or do you think that was something before you even got into competitive sports that you were always looking to achieve the next level?
I've been blessed, by God naturally to have a natural, intelligence and also a natural athletic ability. I was never the best, but I was better than the average. So I could do well with not working as hard, and I didn't really realize how hard you have to work until I got to high school and became more competitive.
Yes.
And I think that's really where I started to learn, just through the academics and through the sports, that you really have to fully apply yourself to things. And that's where I become really competitive with myself at that point.
Yes. And for those listeners, I will also want to disclose, although we were not in the same high school at the same time, we did go to the same high school. It is a all-boy preparatory school taught by the Jesuit Catholic priests in Kansas City, Missouri. And I would say, and I'm sure Dr. Haake would agree, that the teachers who, when I went there, were often a mixture of priests as well as non-priests, and then the coaches really did drive you. And the athletics competition, it was something very, very important. I love to go back and talk to the students each year and talk to them about what they're learning, because some, at that age, when you're very young and you have that opportunity, you don't understand how important some of those ethics and some of that morality and your knowledge of Christianity is later on in life. And would you say has been very important to you, Dr. Haake, as far as the ethics and morality? It
definitely has. And that started with my parents growing up. I mean, my parents are very faith-driven, and it's a great blessing that I've had. And I didn't really realize until I started practicing dentistry how those things affected my life. I mean, I think in all industries, you see good things and bad things. You see people taking advantage of people, and people doing the right thing. And that's always been a core ethic for me, is, the golden rule: do unto others as you have done unto you. And that
was started by your family, you mentioned.
Yeah, and that's just started with my parents. But again, you get that at Rockhurst. I went to Jesuit undergraduate and Jesuit dental school. They continue that message through.
Were there any particular mentors you had, either in sports or academia, that?
Growing up, I mean, really, my dad.
Yes.
My dad owned his own business with some other, some other family members, and one or two non-family members. But it was his leading by example, and having his own business. It was, I think, me kind of looking up to my dad. It's like, I want to do that myself someday.
Yes.
And, so he's been great throughout my life as a great mentor and a great example of how to, lead a business.
Yes. So with your father's example as an entrepreneur, and you mentioned earlier that you thought about the possibility of being a physician. That's kind of broad. Were there any other types of professions that you were looking at growing up before you went to college?
Well, not really growing up. But when I did get to college, it was like, okay, I've got to decide, what path I'm going to take. And, sometimes I have patients ask me, when did you decide to become a dentist? Did you want to do that your whole life? It's like, no, I didn't. I have a brother who's a physician. When I was in college, he was on his way to medical school. So naturally, that was the tendency to go towards medicine. But it never really felt right. And I looked at, what about pharmacy, or what about physical therapy? And none of those seemed right either. And, one day I went to a lecture. They were giving a lecture about, medicine and dentistry. And I was like, well, I'll go for the medicine and then I'll leave. But I think they knew people would do that, so they did dentistry first. And I went in there, they talked about dentistry, and I left. I didn't even wait. I didn't even stay for medicine because, this is it. This is what I want to do.
That's interesting because also in business, there's not just one rule. You do this and it's going to go, have runaway success. Often you have to experiment and try and learn. And in those, there's some things that don't have runaway success, don't even progress or profit.
Yeah.
And you have to learn and quickly make a decision. So that's is very interesting. Tell us about when you applied to dental school, how difficult that was, and how many applicants, and what's the screening process like? Which percentage gets through to becoming
and these are it's almost 20 years ago, so it's I'm not sure how accurate these numbers, but what I recall is I think from my class at Creighton University, I want to say there was probably around 2,500 applicants. In my class, there was about 75 or 80. So that kind of gives you an idea of how many people get in. Now, most people apply to multiple places, so I'm sure there's duplicates in there. But still, it's pretty competitive. It's much more competitive today than it was 20 years ago. So it's just in talking to some of my patients who've decided to try to get into dental school. But it's as far as in the number of people who finished from that, who started,
yes,
I want to say we had 2 or 3 people who didn't complete, and those were the first 2 years. I mean, once people got through that second year,
yes,
they finished years 3 and 4. So
the selection process was very good at Creighton.
Yeah, I think it is, and it's tough. I mean, you've got to start preparing in your undergraduate years for the requirements. I mean, obviously you have to have the GPA to get in.
Yes.
And now I know there's an interview process, which wasn't as stringent back then. Another thing that they're requiring people to do now is to spend time in a dental office. I mean, I did that, but you didn't have to do that at the time, and I think that's great. Because the last thing you want is somebody to get into dental school. They're there for a year and I don't like this.
It's too big of an investment of your time and and financially.
Yeah, and so I think it's a great that they're having kids do that now.
Yes. Now, speak about time and finance and opportunity costs. Mm-hmm. When you went to dental school, what were some of those challenges? Did you struggle with certain academic portions or finance, or were you required to did you have a job that what were those challenges when you went through the program?
Financially, it's not hard to get the student loans,
right?
Especially for dentists. Dentists are a safe bet, so to speak. So that's not a tough thing to deal with. There are scholarships and grants and stuff like that available for people. From a time management standpoint too. I mean, it's that you learn a lot of time management your first couple years in dental school. So that's one of the big obstacles to overcome. I mean, it's school and studying, and I would give myself a day off a week. I would take Saturdays off. I don't want to study 7 days a week. I mean, who wants to do that,
Right.
But I would be in there, 10 to 12 hours on Sundays. I'd study, a good, probably 4 hours on average during the week. And we were in class 8 to 5 every day on top of that. So
wow.
So it's a pretty strong time commitment. It's a job. It's a full-time job. There's no doubt about it.
So you really were not able to have a job. And was there anybody that ever did that you knew?
Yeah, I didn't have a job. Some of my classmates did have jobs more toward the third and fourth year because that's not exactly as academically strenuous to the third and fourth years.
Right.
That's more clinical years. We still had didactic courses that we took.
Right.
So you have more free time to do those to do those things if you wanted to have like a part-time job or something. But
yes.
I never took advantage of that. In hindsight, I wish I would have. But
right now, I remember in graduate school we had one student, and she had not just one child, but she had 2 children during the program. Did you have any of those exceptions? And she was working as a full-time nursing director. But did you have any of those people that were kind of just overachievers and like, how could this person do that?
We did. I mean, we had a number of people in my class that had multiple kids.
Wow.
And those students just always amazed me.
Very inspiring.
Yeah, because I mean, I would talk to them and say, how do you do that? When do you study? They said, well, I come home from school, we have family dinner, I spend time with my kids. After the kids go to bed, then I start studying. And it's like, oh man. And they would, where I would have been up till around 11 or 12 studying, they're up till 1 or 2 studying.
So they really had to sacrifice.
They really had to sacrifice. And the thing that just amazed me is a lot of times those were some of the best students in the class.
Yes.
And they just really, really impressed me with their dedication and to not only to their family, but
yes.
To school as well.
Sometimes they actually have that tangible, family member there that they see every single day. That's where maybe a single man or woman doesn't always have that, knowing that I have to provide for these kids and my wife. So it's
a good motivator.
So someone who is wanting to go become a dentist or something that's very challenging, based on your perspective of going through a very rigorous program that you did in dental school, what would be some of the advice that you would give to someone in those situations?
Well, I would say, obviously work hard. I mean, you're not going to get in skating by. I mean, it's just going to take dedication. It's going to take hard work. Studying. I didn't study as much in undergraduate as I did in dental school, but I still, studied pretty hard. And I got good grades, obviously, because you have to get in.
Yes.
And I think this goes not just for dentistry or medicine. It goes for any profession. You got to love what you do.
Yes.
That's one thing that I've learned over the years that, it's one of those things I've always heard it, but I never really listened or understood it until I got to the application of it.
Yes.
You really need to enjoy what you do.
It's very important. There are so many, I won't name names, but there's so many lawyers that I know who, were pushed into that by a family member. It's a great profession, but if you don't have that passion, and if it's not something that every cell in your body, on your own, you have the initiative and you want to do it more than anything else, and nobody's driving you to that. You're doing it through self-motivation. A lot of those people I know get burnt out and want to do something else. And now your profession, it's also been a blessing because you have that opportunity as a dentist to start your own business as a dentist. And was that something that while you're in the dental program, did they teach you about starting your own business? Was there any planning or classes on that?
We did have one class. Dental schools are notoriously bad at teaching you how to run a business.
Right.
And they gave us some really basic stuff. At the time, I thought it was, this is really great, but then when I started my own practice, School of Hard Knocks, I was like, that stuff was a great foundation, but it's not anywhere close to, what we could have been taught.
Yes.
And I don't fault the schools for that because their job is to teach us how to be a dentist.
Special skill of dentistry.
Yeah, not the special skill of running a business.
And actually, when I went to grad school in business, even in entrepreneurship, they said it didn't help me as far as the small business. It was still the entrepreneurship of the MBA was how to start and run and operate and function inside of a large corporation. And it is very difficult. And seeing someone such as yourself, a small business owner, and having networked with many other business owners across the city, that's where I really love to pick people's brains and make those observations, because that's where, as a business owner, I felt, at least in my opinion, you really do progress and advance, seeing what, people who are right there at that point of friction where the rubber meets the road, what they're applying. And
you're going to make mistakes along the way.
Yes.
One of the things that, I talk about with my wife, and the success that we've had, and we struggled for years and years and years, was that all the mistakes that she said, well, if you had bought a practice, do you think you'd be where you are now? And I was like, no, I don't. Yes. Because the lessons that I learned starting to practice from scratch,
right,
and the mistakes that I made helped shape me to the way I am now. And I think I would have had, and I know I would have had more arrogance, more cockiness.
Sure.
to where, I wouldn't have developed or learned that humility that I've learned going through this process.
Yes.
And it makes a big difference.
Very important question, which you mentioned is, you have some of those steps, challenges, things that don't work out right along the road. What have you used as far as like a decision point to make sure that you can be agile in saying this is not working? Mm-hmm. I don't need to continue going down any further forward on it. What was one of those examples where you had to make that quick rudder steer?
Well, I've had to do that. Actually, a really good one was a few years ago. I bought another location.
Yes.
I started another location out in Raymore, which is just it's kind of on the outskirts of the Kansas City metropolitan area. And it was a great opportunity. It was a great place. All the numbers said, this is a good calculated risk.
Yes.
So we opened that up, and what happened is I was spreading myself too thin.
Right.
I couldn't, my practice here in Overland Park began to stagnate, and the practice out there was growing, but wasn't growing at where I thought it could grow.
Yes.
And I realized I'm spreading myself too thin. I can't do both.
Right.
And so,
that was to your bottom line as well. You're saying it was not profitable as a business.
At that time, no, because that was when I started from scratch again. So I didn't have a base there, a stream of revenue already going just to help it self-sustain. So I was, pouring some money into there. When it was all said and done, I about broke even. I sold it after about a year, and then as soon as I sold it, my practice here in Overland Park started going back up again.
Okay.
And so I saw, I was like, okay, this is not working.
Yes.
I need to sell it and pivot back and focus on my core business.
So you had two locations. What were the factors that led to the decision to concentrate on the Kansas side versus the Missouri for you?
Well, it was my primary practice. It was my original practice. It was the one that was already doing well, established, growing. And I really still to this day think that was a great opportunity out there. I just couldn't devote myself to it anymore as much as it needed.
Now, right out of dental school, was your plan to become an entrepreneur, or did you work for a while for a dental practice?
I worked for another practice. He was, one of the interesting things I always think about with that is the doctor who owned that practice. He was a good dentist. He was, at the time, I didn't realize it, he was a good businessman. He sometimes made decisions and stuff. I was like, why is he doing that? What is he thinking? But then I found myself years later having to make those same decisions. Right. And being on the other side of the table is like, okay, now I understand what he was doing and why. Yes. And, that's one of the reasons why I suggest to people the book, The E-Myth. I think that's a great book. And it really puts into perspective, the technician versus the owner. And, I've seen both sides, and I think that's for me. It's been very valuable because it helps you understand both positions. Yes, it's interesting that you bring that up, and to put a little bit of tiny data behind it. The executive coach at the Henry Block School of Management, where I went to at University of Missouri Kansas City, she mentioned, and this is in the entrepreneur school. Henry Block's known for H&R Block and entrepreneurship, and she'd been there 20 years, and she was just retiring. And she had a long career in business before that, but she had talked to me once, and she said, for all these entrepreneurial ideas that were coming out, she's like, there had only been one group of the students from all those 20 years that actually had moved forward and started a new business. And that's really interesting because you do have to have not just an idea, because a lot of people want to do that, but you have to have some drive and faith. And how important was your faith into starting your business? It was, faith has always been an important aspect of my life, like I mentioned earlier. And whenever I have a big decision to make, I always pray about it. I believe God knows better than I do what I need. Right. What's best for me. And so, even to this day, my wife and I we got to pray about it. What do we want to do here? Yes. And, the way that I parted ways with that practice that I was an associate with, was, I was like, okay, I mean, what am I going to do here? I mean, it was more of an agreement that, we decided, okay, yeah, this isn't the best setup, so we'll just, go our separate ways. And so I was like, okay, what am I going to do? And prayed about it. And one day I was on the phone with my mom, and she's like, why don't you start your own practice? I was like, well, if my mom's saying that, I guess that's the thing I should do. And I don't look for signs. I don't think, send a flood, or
Yes.
strike a tree with lightning or whatever. It's just, I feel that God will send the message to me through the people around me.
Right.
And so I just
They're confirming what was in your head.
Exactly. You just have to listen. You have to be aware of it.
Yes.
What's coming.
So you were kind of being, even mentored, even though that you may not have called it that, but you were observing someone. And through that time when you were working in his practice, what were some of those calculated risks that you knew, if I'm going to start this, there's going to be some costs and some manpower, but what were some of those things that you were making note of before you started your own practice?
That's one of those things I had to learn the hard way, that I made some calculations, but not very intelligent ones.
Right.
I started out in a space that was too big.
Did you have a business plan that you put in?
I really didn't, and because and I don't know what it's like today, but back then, before the mortgage crisis and in the 2000s and all that kind of stuff, they were just
giving
money away. So,
now they don't.
Yeah, now they don't do that.
Maybe for a dentist.
I don't know, because
when I retired in 2014 and no business background before, they weren't giving any money out. So it's
and so I didn't really have to have a business plan. And it was, I'm going to open up. I'm going to hang out, what they call hang out your shingle, and
yes,
and the patients will come.
Yes,
but and we actually did pretty well. We had pretty consistent good growth for a few years, but then the economy went bad.
Yes,
and then that's when my numbers flatlined, and
yes,
and that prolonged the struggle. And it wasn't until about 2011 that I got hooked up with a practice coach, and they helped me on my journey to get to where I am now. Yes.
Now, before we talk about the practice coach, let's talk about something else you just mentioned with the financing, and because that is very, very important. And a lot of folks, there are some different options that people have. Some people want to just think that they're going to be able to rely on a bank to give them. And I found that, like my case, was not possible in 2014 after that crisis. And unless most banks want 24 months of proven track record of quarterly increase in profits to be able to loan any money, and it's got to be in a safe industry. And dentistry is obviously safe, but the reason I wanted to ask you that is there's a lot of people out there that want to know about business, want to know about starting their own business. And what would you say to them as far as, would it, in your recommendation, be prudent to work for an employer, save up a good, financial, egg to be able to move forward and have some of your own ability to make your own decisions? Or, I've known people that did get that bank loan and they require so much paperwork and so much due diligence and constantly, and that's kind of taken away from your time, as well as those angel investors tend to, like the Shark Tank, they're going to take on a little bit more risk that a bank wouldn't, but then they're going to get, 30% or, it's so a lot of people don't calculate that in, but they want to get a big chunk of change right up front. And of those different types of lending, whether it's personal finance through a bank, what in the business world they call family, friends, fools, or an angel investor or a shark, what would you recommend? There's a prudent for somebody that's working and wants to start a small business.
Well, I mean, for me, because I still sometimes make investments.
Yes.
And because I want to expand or whatever.
Correct.
I try to plan ahead so that I can use as much of my own capital and I don't have to bring in any money.
Yes.
Cash flow is the number one thing. I mean, you have to, you can get a loan, but if you don't have the cash flow to service the loan and pay your employees and pay your rent, I mean, it sounds trite, but it's the truth. You have to pay attention to that. The bottom line is the number one thing. And, early on, I had to get a loan to start because I didn't have any capital to put up. Now, like when we expanded, the last time we expanded, like my goal was to make that expansion and not have to take a loan. So I began saving the money early on, well ahead of time because I knew that this expense was coming. So I would every month, okay, I'm going to put this in my separate account, and this is in my build account, this is in my build account. And so when the time came that I had to do the expenditure, I was like, okay, I have the capital to do it, I can self-fund it, and I don't have to take on a loan. So that's not going to affect my cash flow down the road.
Yes.
And I would say if you can do it, but not everybody can do that. And if you can do it totally self-funded, do it. But if you can't, I would say put some of your own money into it. The banks are going to be happier about that you've got some skin in the game. It's also going to help your cash flow. So when you have to service that loan, it's like, oh, hey, because I put up 20% of this,
yes.
My payment's that much lower a month, so that's that much more cash flow and cushion that I have every month.
Yes. So maybe reading between the lines as a business owner, you're saying, don't try to be greedy and, go for broke and get rich quick by a lot of financing, because you really are increasing your risk, and you may be not understanding, that some of what you're trying to do may not be profitable. And then you're always going to have to pay that bank back, whether you are profitable or not. And so some of those other risks as a business owner, one of the things they taught us at graduate business school was the most difficult and challenging thing that, because it's alive, is the human dimension, and with employees and the selection. Have you found that your employees were probably the most important part of your business as an owner?
I've always said employees are my greatest asset in here.
Yes.
We can't do the dentistry without the patients, but without the employees, it doesn't matter how many patients you have.
Yes.
And one of the ththings that I've always done, my years of success, is when I hire somebody and I'm interviewing someone, their experience, their credentials, it's something that I look at, but it's not the primary thing that I make my decision.
Yes.
The primary thing I look at is who I hire, like who they are, not what they are.
Right.
I can train somebody, or we can train somebody to assist. We can train somebody to do the administrative work. When it comes down to dentists and hygienists, you have to have that pre-qualification of the license.
Right.
But that's great because that's actually acts as a screen in and of itself, because typically the best people are going to get the hygiene or the dental degree. The slouches aren't going to get those.
Right.
So there's a little pre-screening involved there, but I really look at, does this person have a caring personality? Does this person have an outgoing personality? Does this person relate well to others? Those are the kinds of things that I look at, because you can't teach that. You can't teach somebody to be a social person. You can't teach somebody to to care for somebody else, just to have a natural caring feeling. That's something either you got it or you don't. So
in your selection for a new employee in the office, do you yourself screen, or do you have someone else? And then those questions, obviously some things are credentials. The person's going to have something pedigree to put on the paper, but do you ask specific soft questions to find that person with the, mindfulness or emotional intelligence and discipline? How has your process been?
The process is, I'm partially involved in the process. My staff is partially involved in the process. I appreciate the staff more kind of narrowing it down than I interview the people. Once I interview the people, then I'll introduce them to the staff. Depending on the situation, I may have them spend a day with the staff. Because the staff can, as is typical, the office has a lot of women in it, and that's what you typically see in physicians' offices, dental offices, that kind of thing. So, their perspective of a potential employee is a lot different than mine as a male. So I like to get their feedback too, because they can pick up on things I can't pick up on.
Right.
And it's great to have that different point of view, and sometimes they've said like, I really like somebody, and they're like, no, okay,
So they clarify some of those blind spots that you may have. Then
exactly
some of the they see the unseen and they present to you and you make the decision.
Yeah, and that's one of the things is I was going to say is that ultimately the decision is mine.
Yes.
But what my staff says and what they observe carries a lot of influence because they're here and because I trust them and because I know that they know that they're going to be working with these people, and if they don't think that it's going to be a good relationship, between the employees, then I definitely listen to that.
Yes. Now, speaking of that human dimension with employees, and I want to provide this as encouragement to other business owners or people that want to be in business or a manager. There are always mistakes that are made, not just by the staff, but some of those employees make mistakes, and you have to forecast that is going to happen. Some people have to go, and you're going to have to, sometimes work a little bit extra harder to account for people that get sick or just quit, or you decide that it's time for them to leave. But what has been one of those examples where there was a moral dilemma and you had to take swift, decisive action to correct something that you saw as ethically not right?
Close to a year ago, we actually had a situation where an employee was taking the liberty to write prescriptions.
Right.
That was a decision I had to make that day. I found out about it. I had another staff member who was kind of auditing everything and came across like, this doesn't seem right here, and let me know about it. That's a very serious situation, and I confronted that employee that day, that afternoon, and just said, did you do this? And the employee said yes, and I said, well, then today's your last day. I hated doing that because she did a great job,
right?
But it was a situation where this is something that is putting her at risk. It's putting the practice at risk.
Right.
It's not good for anyone.
Right.
And that's just something that I can't be tolerated. It's got to be taken care of right away.
There's the good and the bad about that. Obviously the bad that an employee broke those, but that good that you have not just learned from it. You had a process in place. You had checks and balances. You have a staff that's monitoring, not just providing a little bit of oversight, because there's a lot of paperwork that goes on, and that's something that definitely the rewards and appreciation for catching something like that, but also yourself as a business owner, just like back in the Marines, we have certain criteria. If somebody crosses this phase line, we have to engage that. It's not something that we're gonna wait because something else may develop, and you as a leader and an owner, you have to take that immediate response. And it may not, because you're working in such close proximity, because you're not just the owner, you are practicing within at belt buckle distance with these people, and you develop friendships in part of that, but you have to have that. And it's very important for managers and business owners to not. That's why in the Marines we can get very close, but we cannot fraternize and let that cloud our judgment.
Yeah, and that's one of the things too. Is that I want to be friends with my staff, but at the same time, I kind of talk about it and I tell some of them the relationship that I have with my staff is like with my kids.
Yes.
Not that my staff are kids,
Right.
But with my kids, I want to be my kids' friend. But when it comes down to it, I'm the parent.
Right.
With my staff, I want to be friends with my staff, but when it comes down to it, I'm still their boss. I'm still, the one in charge. And so there's still that boundary. And I understand that. And I think they understand that too. And that's just kind of the way that I see that relationship. I know in some places it's not like that. But that's just, for me personally, that's how I see it. That's how I establish everybody's roles.
Right. And one thing I must comment about him and his leadership is it's not criticizing, organizations that wear purple or have every day as a fun day that people bringing in jelly beans or, chili days. But you have a business, you're the business owner, and you come in, it is business. I have been completely impressed at the efficiency and the professionalism that is maintained, but I also do see that compassion that comes across, and people don't say that, but I can, intrinsically feel that they realize that you have their best interests and their family's best interests, and as well as your patient's health as your top priorities, even above yourself. Is that something that you've developed throughout your life, or is that something that you learned to do, to put others first?
Well, I think it goes back to, like I said, treat others as you want to be treated.
Right.
And I've always, from the day I started, and you can ask I don't know if they'd remember because it was so long ago, but the people who worked for me initially, I always said, when the practice is successful, I want you to be successful too. I'm not going to hoard, all the monetary gain. I'm going to give some of that back to the staff.
Yes.
By that same token, though, when I go over that with the staff, I always tell them, because I tend to not micromanage.
Right.
I delegate, and that was a big thing for me to learn how to do when we made the transition from a stagnant practice to a more prolific business. Is that I can't do everything.
Yes.
And so in the delegation and the micromanagement, it's helped make it a lot better. But what I tell them is, I don't care if I give you a task to do. I don't care how you do it, but when you do it, you need to ask yourself a couple questions. Is what I'm doing moral? Is what I'm doing ethical? And how does this benefit the patient? Right. If you can't positively answer those three questions, don't do it.
Right.
Because the moral and the ethical is, I always say, I want to be able to sleep at night.
Right.
We need to do things morally and ethically. Part of that is, if it's not good for the patient, it's not moral, or it's not ethical, or both.
Yes.
And so this has to be a relationship where the patient benefits and where we benefit.
Yes.
And if that lacks in any way, if that relationship falls apart, then we're going to fail.
Right.
And we're going to fail in the job that we do, and we're going to fail from a financial aspect as well.
Yes. Now, as a business owner and someone is from the outside that's looking into your practice, I have noticed you are applying a lot of principles that I didn't learn at graduate business school. They don't teach those, like those trench line, fighting skills that, the reason I came to his practice is he had a mailer that came out to me, and I'm like, oh, his last name is the same name as a very good, one of my best friends from the military. So I just said, I'll give him a try. But some of those practices, you had to have some business coaching. Can you talk a little bit about the value that you've gained from, coaching and what they've taught you?
They've what the core of it is, if I was going to sum it up as short as possible, was what you typically see in a dental office is you see a dental practice. And what you see when you come here is a dental business. And I know that has a negative connotation because people think of corporate dentistry, which I'm personally not a big fan of, but it has its place. But when you run it as a business that's run efficiently, it's run where, like I said, I'm not micromanaging. One of the nice things one of the things I've always been proud of is that we don't have the highest fees around, and I don't want to have the highest fees around. I want to be right in the meat of it, right in the middle.
Yes.
And that way, being a larger office helps to keep my overhead costs down, so that, like an insurance plan that if I was by myself, I wouldn't be able to do because I was by myself and my costs are higher.
Right.
Because we have 3 doctors in one place, we can keep our overhead down so that I can take those plans that don't pay as well.
Yes.
And that's one of the things that I, some doctors are like, oh, I can't believe you do that. I say, well, but, those patients need to be treated too.
Right.
And by having those lower costs, I'm able to do that, and able to see those plans that the people on those plans that I otherwise wouldn't be able to see. So that's been something I'm really happy about.
Yes. So I've seen your staff grow since I retired and became a patient. You've added the extra dentists, the specialties. but those come with extra costs to so you do have to plan that out, set money aside. It has to be disciplined, and that's something as a business owner. Can you talk a little bit about the importance of, as you mentioned, cash flow, but having a plan and utilizing that discipline to set funds aside to accomplish those goals?
Yeah, and what you talk about the discipline of setting the money aside. So this is one of the things I learned with the coaching group is I get a daily report every day, whether I'm here or not, and it says how many patients we're seeing, how many patients were scheduled, what we did in production, what we did in collection. There's I want to say I counted up once. I think there's around 40 different points that we look at. Now I don't study those every day. I look at them. Okay, all right. This is what we did. But that helps me to know where we are and how we're doing for the month. It gives me, because there's, like I said, there's 3 doctors in here. There's 5 hygienists in here. I can't look and go to every person. Okay, how'd you do today? Or what'd you do?
Right.
So it gives me a good summary. And I get that even when I'm not in the office, I'm on vacation or whatever. I get that, so I can have the comfort of knowing, hey, they're still doing everything they're supposed to be doing. And from a cash flow standpoint, that helps me say, okay, this is how much money we brought in today. Okay, these are what my expenses are. Okay, this is my excess. Okay, now I can put that over here. Right. Set that aside into. I have multiple accounts or sub accounts in my for my bank account. So it's like, okay, this if I'm saving up for equipment. Okay, this goes into the equipment account.
Right.
Okay, this goes into an emergency fund, and
yes,
and this goes into the checking account that pays all the bills, and
right.
So being mindful of where everything is helps me track and not get fall behind or get ahead of myself. Right. I'll also look ahead and say, okay, these times of year usually are slower.
Yes.
Okay. All right. That's 2 months from now. Okay. What do I need to do to prepare for that?
Right.
These times you're usually better. Okay, so what can I do to prepare for that? You have to prepare for the good times as well as prepare for the bad.
Yes.
Otherwise, you can find yourself, oh, hey, it's a great month. I can spend more. I can buy a new piece of equipment. Well, but you're gonna have a bad month.
Right.
And you have to, it's the 7 years of famine, the 7 years of fortune.
I'm having that seasonal slowdown right now, and this is always these people spend a lot over the holidays, and then they have to pay it off. And so in my business, there's not a lot of capital that they have readily available in January. And let's speak briefly on, so you transitioned. You were originally, you started with just yourself, correct? And then you started to add the doctors. So there's advantages to both. But let's first talk to our audience that's small business owners or wanting to be a small business owner, because you said you can't do it all, and you definitely can't. But when you start out, if you start hiring all these people to do all these extra duties, you're not going to have positive cash flow.
No, you're not.
So can you talk to that person? When you just started out, you had to wear many hats. You're probably writing checks and paying bills and doing things that a lot of dentists in other practice wouldn't normally do. And how important was that for you to start to get that hockey puck trend going up as far as your profits, being lean? I encounter that a lot every day still, because when I started this business, I knew how to do everything on the computer. Yes.
We're all digital. I knew how to do everything.
Right.
My wife helped out a lot, and she still helps out a lot. And I always say I would never be where I am today without her. And she knew how to do certain aspects. I knew how to do certain aspects. The two of us could run the entire office. Okay. As we've grown, she still handles certain aspects of the practice, mainly like some insurance things. But my duties have gone down. So now sometimes people will come to me, how do you do this on the software? It's like,
right.
I don't know. I don't know anymore.
Right.
10, 15 years ago, you got to do this.
Yes.
And so just as we've grown, I've taught people how to do it.
Right.
The software has changed. They've continued to learn how to do it, and I haven't.
Just step back.
But I still have a basic knowledge. So if something's not right, if I don't see something looks a little fishy, I can say, hey, what's going on here? Why is this doing this or whatever? So it's great to have that foundation so I can at least check trends or see if something's going wrong. But it's also great that I can delegate to the people. But if I had hired those people from the get-go, there's things that would probably slip by me.
Yes.
And then also I wouldn't have had the cash flow in order to get to where I am now.
And that's a key point. I didn't just want to make it, but I did. But you heard it from him that so many people want to start out and they think that they're going to be the CEO of a business and people are going to be working for them. And I personally have not known one that was successful where, the business owner, you can call him a CEO, but he or her in a few core, they're wearing multiple hats and they're starting out in business is not something that's easy unless it's a hobby. And those generally don't pay so well. But also one of the detriments of when you're doing everything yourself and you have to do that for a phase, and hopefully it's not just for a lifetime, but you also, like in dentistry, you can't easily take a vacation because that means everybody else, if you're the sole dentist and practicer, I mean, when you take a vacation, basically have to go to shutdown, and then people have emergencies. So that is a problem. So that, and then you began to add dentists, and that allowed some flexibility so that when you stepped away for a vacation or a holiday, other people can be seen.
Yeah, and that's one of the big things that that the coach that I've used is talked about is set up your practice, so that you can take the time off, and the practice is still generating revenue.
Yes,
and that's a huge advantage that I have here. And it's kind of funny. One of my doctors always comes to me and says, "You need to take more time off," but I think that's my small business owner, my entrepreneur coming out is that yes, I do need to take more time off.
Right.
But I want to be in there. I want to be doing this stuff. I have to make a conscious effort to take time off, otherwise it doesn't happen.
Yes.
And I think a lot of small business owners are like that too.
Right.
We have to make that conscious effort. And I'm lucky enough, and I've worked hard enough that I've grown this to where I have that capability where I can leave and I don't have to tell my staff, well, you got to take a week off.
Yes.
My staff can continue to work while I'm gone because there's other doctors here that can work. And so that benefits me, it benefits the staff, and it benefits the patients.
Yes.
Because then if they do have an emergency, well, Dr. Haake's not here, but you can see Dr. Boydston or Dr. Dahlquist, and it's peace of mind for me too.
Yes. And adding those extra staff members, especially with the dentists and then the additional staff, that allows you to have time off, your staff to have the flexibility. But it also, is those profits continuous, it's not just feast or famine period. You have a continuing residual, long-term, you can forecast much easier. Now, moving up in not just practicing dentistry, but you're also managing, there's things that you do need to either delegate to your staff or outsource so that you're not doing it all. Mm-hmm. So since you were at the genesis as a small business owner and you were doing so much of it yourself, how would you recommend to somebody, as you being the mentor, to phase that in to where you are not doing it all and feeling like you must do it all? Because sometimes people feel they're being micromanaged or not trusted, and it's not necessarily beneficial for you to do it all over the long term.
Whenever I've added somebody, one of the first questions I ask is, okay, this is how much I'm going to pay this person. Is this person going to pay for themselves?
Yes.
That's question number one. Then question number two would be, okay, how is this going to benefit the practice? And, depending on what the position is, how's this going to benefit the patients? And I typically try to forecast ahead. Okay, where am I going to need the person? I want to hire somebody who's going to help grow the practice just a little bit before we actually need them.
Right.
I don't want to be trying to play catch up. Now there's been times where I've hired someone too early And there's been times where I hired somebody too late. But it's hard to be 100%.
Yes.
And so I kind of look at it and try to say, okay, where is there a need? If I fill that need, is it going to be beneficial? And if it is beneficial, then I'll add the person. And that's not always a monetary thing. I've got a staff member who helps a lot with our marketing things. And, with her, it's not like an assistant where if I add a dental assistant, it's like, okay, now I can work out of 2 rooms and that dental assistant's going to pay for themselves. With Kayla, it's, Kayla helps save me time.
Yes.
And for me, time is very valuable because if I'm doing a task that one of my staff can be doing, that takes me away from the chair.
Yes.
And that's where I'm the most profitable, is at the chair treating the patients.
It's your competitive advantage.
Yeah, exactly. And so, and then if I'm not seeing the patients, then the patients aren't being taken care of. So it's beneficial from a time standpoint to have Kayla to do the things for that kind of, for those tasks rather than me doing them.
Yes.
So it's not always a financial, is this person financially valuable to me, but it's also this person from a time management standpoint valuable to me.
Yes. And speaking of time management, it's one of the things that's really impressed me about your practice in that, you ask the patients, how they like to receive information, whether it's a phone call, and some people, they want a text, but you find that out, you identify with your patients, their preference, and then, because you are trying to make as efficient use of your time. And I'm always very impressed that, before and after, you are doing very thorough communication to the patient, and it's streamlining things here in your office. And how important is that to make sure that, this is like, effective pit stop. And I mean, once that car comes in, you guys are going to work. And I've seen that with yourself being in the chair, handing things back. You are really skilled to, just like, not comparing him to a samurai, but using the tools like a sword with as much skill, and as much precision, and as much efficiency. You really have that down to a science. Was that something you particularly did yourself, or just through a lifetime, or with coaching, or how did you get there?
All of the above.
Okay.
Really, it's some of it comes with experience, some of it comes with teaching, being taught something. We track our patients getting back on time. That's one of the number one complaints you hear from dental offices or physicians' offices. Oh, they never get you back on time. So we focus on, if you don't track it, it doesn't get better.
Yes.
We focus on, okay, our patients getting back on time.
Yes.
We have a protocol that the staff goes through if we are running behind to help, alleviate any frustration that a patient who's getting back late might have, which thankfully doesn't happen very often, but it does happen. Just a doctor, just a physician's office, we're working on people's bodies. Sometimes unforeseen things occur. Filling might need to be a lot bigger than you expected, and that's going to take more time.
Yes.
And then once the patients are in the chair, our assistants, we generally work with one assistant. There's some offices, like especially multi-doctor offices, where the assistants just rotate around, and all the assistants can work with all the doctors, but I have one assistant that primarily works with me. Dr. Boydston does, Dr. Dahlquist does, so we learn each other's nuances, and so we can become very efficient.
Yes.
I know my assistant, because I see it happening every day, she sometimes knows what I want before I know.
Yes.
Because she's so in tune with how I do things in my process.
As a team.
Yeah, as a team. And it's very very much less stressful for me to know that I can have that confidence in somebody and I can let her do things. I can even, because there are some things the assistants can do that I don't need to be there for.
Yes.
So it's having that trust that I can have Michaela do those things. It's huge, and it helps us run more efficiently in the office.
And some people may think, this is some kind of paid advertising. It's not at all. I will give you some reasons why. When I arrive, it's never been more than 1 to 3 minutes, and that's coming in at least every 6 months. But and I appreciate that as a business owner and as a charity director that, I'm coming in and you are immediately, and I understand, I need to be on time, and you're immediately getting treated right then and there. And then going out, a lot of practices don't do the back end where, okay, we'd like to see you, but there's communication constantly amongst your staff, not just from those that are treating the patients, but those that are, they are managing the follow-up. They know that, okay, this person's coming out and they need this procedure later on, and that is clearly and effectively communicated, and it's scheduled. I've been very impressed with that.
Thank you.
But that's not by accident.
No.
You have had your input, and how do you do that?
Well, we have systems. I think any successful business or corporation has systems.
Yes.
We have a process that literally starts when the patient calls for the new patient visit. And that process doesn't end until the patient their treatment's been completed.
Yes.
And even once the treatment's been completed, it doesn't really stop because, patients need to come in for their recare.
Yes.
So when you have a system, if someone calls in sick and you have a replacement, you can say, okay, this is how we do it. They can just step right in and they can pick up where that person has left off. The systems also help prevent things from falling through the cracks. And no system is perfect. I tell the staff, and we are constantly working on how can we make this better. This isn't working very well here. What can we do to improve that? And that comes from tracking the numbers.
Yes.
And when we track those things, okay, well, we're falling off here. And I won't typically address something if it happens once. Once could just be an anomaly. So once I see it 2 or 3 times or 4 times, it's like, okay, something's falling through the cracks here. We need to find out what it is and plug that gap.
Yes.
And without the systems in place, you don't know. You can't look at it and say, okay, here's the process for that. Where do we think we're lacking? Well, because this is where we're falling off, I think it's this spot right here.
Yes.
Okay, well then let's adapt it and change that so that we can be more efficient.
Yes. And again, as a business owner, and I rely on a lot of other people to assist in my business from a wide range, but the primary 3, banking, security, and construction. I don't see those processes, as complete and as efficient as yours, but it takes a lot of training. So what are some of those incentives that you reward your staff with so you don't have to have the problem of the turnover? What do you motivate them by?
There are incentives for the staff, and really those incentives are to promote good rapport with the patients, not seeing the patient as a mouth, seeing the patient, as a person.
Right.
And also efficiency.
Right.
The incentives here are not, well, you sell this much stuff, then you're going to get more money. We don't do any of that. It's you make sure your schedule's full.
Yes.
You make sure that you're diagnosing treatment properly. You make sure that if treatment is diagnosed, that the patient are getting their needs taken care of. If they do the jobs that they're supposed to be doing anyway, and they do them very well, then they get a reward for that.
Yes.
And it's worked really well over the years, and it's helped me and helped the practice be successful. It's helped them to be successful. And it's helped the patients to get their treatment done so they're healthy.
I know as a patient, you do feel, that the staff has your concern. It's engaging conversation. They really want to know. And when you come back, they know your life, what you've had that discussion with previously, and it's almost like a little family. And to include, hey, what kind of music, and they are really focused on that patient instead of that patient being a customer is somebody that they are providing a valuable resource with their own dental health. And how do you cultivate that with your staff to be mindful of each patient?
I think it goes back to hiring the right people, people who genuinely care. And when you do that, we have to kind of train the people. Okay, these are the things you need to look for. If someone says this, think about that. we do have something we call the 4-minute rule, where when a new patient comes back, or when I see a new patient, before I can talk dentistry with them, I have to talk to them and find things out about them personally.
Okay.
I think that makes a huge difference.
Yes.
Some people are more open than others, but that's how I really get to learn about my patients is through those initial 4 minutes.
Right.
When I started out, I was cleaning patients' teeth.
Right.
The amount of information, the things I learned about them personally, about their jobs, about their families, by cleaning their teeth was immense. It was huge.
Yes.
And I don't have time to do that anymore, and I've got hygienists who do those cleanings. So that's where that 4-minute rule comes in, is that gives me that time with the patients that I can learn about them that I don't have while I'm treating them.
Spending 26 and a half years in the Marine Corps, I never had dentists that asked any of those questions. Maybe a couple up front, and you never, it didn't even stick to the end of what they asked you up front, and
So here does the procedure.
it went out the ear, and I think that is because in the military, whenever you go back, whether it's a doctor or a dentist, it's always going to be somebody new. Mm-hmm. And here it's much more personal and intimate. You're getting to know that individual, but you have to have a time. I can't spend all day doing this because I have to get inside their mouth, and then the conversation has to end. So you do have you're following a schedule. Talking about following a schedule, let's talk about the next step in dentistry, and where do you see those innovations and the future of dentistry going?
I see good things and bad things. I think, unfortunately, corporate dentistry is getting more of a foothold. Like I say, corporate dentistry does have a place, but it tends to be, at least from what I've seen, and read, and in talking to people, interviewing people who have worked in corporate dentistry, it's very profit-driven.
Yes.
Rather than patient-driven. And I've always said, if we take care of the patients, the money will take care of itself.
Yes.
And, when you flip that around, and you just cause all kinds of problems. And, but part of that is taking care of the patient, providing good service for the patient. You got to know what good service is.
Yes.
I thought I knew what good service was until I was taught what good service really was.
Yes.
And so I think that's one of the bad things. And another thing I see happening, and this is one of the challenges that we run into, is commoditization. I think your average patient, they believe, and I think they're pretty accurate, is that they can get decent dentistry no matter where they go.
Right.
And for the most part, like I said, that's an accurate statement. It's not very often I see patients come in and their work is just atrocious. It's rare, but it does happen. Now, that being said, if someone thinks that, I live in Overland Park, and then I move out to Olathe, I got to find another dentist in Olathe because it's close to me.
Right.
Because the dentist out there is just as good as the dentist back in Overland Park.
Yes.
So what we try to do is, give them an experience and develop a relationship with them so that they still drive in from Olathe.
Yes.
And we've got people literally who come to see us from all over the world. And we've got patients in Hawaii. We've got patients from Florida. Because they move away for whatever reason. It's like, I still want to see Dr. Haake for my stuff.
Right.
So the commoditization is something that's happening, and that's something that as practitioners, and if we want to be successful, we want to continue to grow, we have to try to figure out a way to move through that and harness that to our advantage. From a technology standpoint, I think the technology is just amazing. It amazes me the things that they come out with and things they're working on. It's a constant evolution, and it's a constant evolution that is making things easier and better for patients and for dentists as well.
Yes, but do you see some of that as possibly taking away from that personal doctor-to-patient relationship?
Some of it, yes, and some of it, no. I've talked about this with some people, and some people are like, are you crazy? It's like, I think that there will come a time where we're hooking people's mouths up to robots, and the robots are going to do the fillings, or they're going to do the crown preps.
Automated process.
An automated process. I do think that that's coming. Now, how close are we? I don't know. I mean, you're seeing that already happening in medicine. So, medicine tends to lead the way for dentistry. Things tend to occur in medicine before they occur in dentistry, and then we kind of borrow from them.
Yes.
So, I mean, I think it's coming, and that will, kind of hurt. That will hurt the relationship between the dentist and the patient, because you're going to hook them up, and the dentist is going to leave the room and come back when it's done.
Yes.
If that, but I don't see that as way down the road. Will I see that in my lifetime? I mean, I don't know, but I mean, some crazy ideas that they had 100 years ago, we're doing now. So.
Yes. And having a business in automation, I think that's a reality. And just like my business, it's about replacing some of that manpower and making it as efficient as possible. And speaking of that, in the dental community, I know when I first came in, you looked at my teeth. Oh, you have some things in here that we haven't seen before, or that you had, but it was because, and that's sort of how I knew you cared. You said, hey, you were in the military, because some of the stuff, this amalgam and other things in your mouth, we don't usually see unless that person's been in the military.
Yeah.
And I know those are due to certain budgetary and cost perspective. Where do you, I mean, some practices probably could find the most, highest cost. Do you even, have a menu, or you're always going to do, what's best right no matter what the cost is?
When it comes to filling material, we don't do silver. I have no silver in this office.
Yes. Because of health reasons.
I think it's the composite, the tooth colored fillings, I think, are superior restoration. I have no silver in my mouth. I only have composite in my mouth. And yes, I've had fillings as a dentist. So, nobody's perfect. But I just think it's a better material. The patients like it better because of the color. So the silver is something that it still is a good material. It still does a good job. It serves its purpose. But for me, I don't use it, and we don't use it here, because I think there's better options.
Yes.
That's not to say that composite is the end-all, be-all, best thing in the world, because it's not. It has its disadvantages. There's no perfect material. It's just balancing those things. When it comes to crowns, there's different materials too. In the last 10 years or so, there's been some great all-porcelain materials come out that we're not really utilizing the metal or the gold anymore.
Right.
Because we have stuff that can withstand the pressure it's put under in the mouth.
Yes.
So, a lot of practices are transitioning into, not really by intention, but because the materials are advancing, into metal-free offices.
Yes.
And I think that's great, because they look better and they're just as strong,
yes.
Or at least comparably strong, that we don't have to worry about them when we put them in patients' mouths.
Yes. Now, let's move left of the drill and talk about, you'd mentioned that you have some fillings, and as a dentist, knowing what is going on in the mouth and how it gets there, being trained on that, we don't all have that. And how would you wrap it up very concisely as far as, 3 axioms, to take care of preventative, make sure your teeth don't rot?
Make sure your teeth don't rot. Yeah. 3 things. The obvious: brush and floss like you should.
Yes.
I tell people who don't floss, hey, you're ordinary. Don't be ordinary. Be extraordinary. Floss your teeth.
Yes.
Obviously your home care is a huge, huge thing. Another one is, healthy diet. Healthy diet tends to starve the bacteria in your mouth from the ability to be able to invade and infect your teeth and your gums. So healthy diet is very important. And thirdly, keep up with your recalls, your recares. When you do that, and I a lot of times will emphasize that to my patients, hey, you've got a filling that's in the early stages. We caught this because you come in like you should.
Right.
That's going to benefit you so much, because now that filling is not going to be large, or you're not going to have to worry about a root canal, because we're catching it when in the early phases.
Right.
So that's a big thing.
And when you say, also for that preventative healthy diet, can you talk a little bit more about that? Is it just sugar, or is it other things as well?
It's not just sugar. Acidic. Sometimes people say, oh, I only drink Diet Coke. Well, that's great because there's no sugar, but it's also an acidic environment.
Right.
And the two things the bacteria need to infect your teeth are, an energy source, sugar, and in the way they infect your teeth is through an acid process. So if your saliva is more acidic, then the bacteria have more ability to take, get foothold in your teeth. So it's not just sugar. I mean, there's other aspects as well. There's other.
How important is it to stay hydrated and drink?
Very important, especially people with dry mouth. We always tell people with dry mouth, because medications, one of the number one side effects, dry mouth. Drink water through the day. Stay hydrated. Water helps flush acid out of your mouth. So if you are drinking a Diet Coke, which is fine, sometimes people, I eat candy. Is that okay? Yeah, that's fine. I mean, I eat candy too. It's good. I like it. But it's I don't eat it throughout the day. I don't put sugar and coffee and drink it throughout the day.
Yes.
Those are the bad things that you can do. Having things in moderation, having things like with a meal or a quick snack, that's fine. You just don't want to be bathing your teeth in sugar and carbs and acid all day.
Yes. It's just like if you get dirt on your hands, you need to wash it off before you let it affect other parts of your body. So let's talk about your specific job and how you maintain, other than your oral health. So you're coming into work and you have to set the conditions for the rest of your staff. You're not just coming in to work on patient after patient. You're looking at holistically your business, coming up with a game plan, briefing staff, and then your mental focus. I mean, then you have to go down to, focusing very closely on a small set of space and staying ahead of the curve with your whole schedule throughout the day. So mentally, that must be, it can be exhausting. But let's talk about how you, again, stay left of, being wiped out or burnt out by, your diet, your exercise, how you relieve stress, how you eat, and if you listen to Dr. Katie Singh Hassan talk about sleep, how important are those things to yourself, to sleep, to recreate, to spend time with your family, to have a positive work schedule?
Well, I'm not, my diet's not the greatest. It's not ideal, but I try to watch how much I eat. I watch what I eat. I can thank my wife for putting vegetables in food at dinner, because
we wouldn't normally choose those.
Yeah, I wouldn't normally choose that. But I do work out, I lift weights, I do cardio. I try to keep myself in shape. I really think a healthy body is a healthy mind. And those things, especially the lifting weights, that's a big stress release for me.
Well, it releases endorphins and clears your mind. Same thing with sleep. It's cleans out those, I forget what Dr. Katie, like this beta something.
The beta amyloid plaques they were talking
beta
about.
Amyloids, yeah, because you have to. It's just like if your body's physically exhausted, your mind is physically exhausted, and you start to slip. And as a business owner, or if you're working inside somebody's mouth and you're just so, it affects your visual acuity, and you don't see something that somebody's choking on, or something that came off from a drill or the tooth.
Well, and the biggest thing for that is discipline.
Yes.
I mean, I tell the staff, and this is what I practice, is if I'm tired at 4:00 and we have that last patient, I have to get myself in that state of mind that I'm giving 100%. If I'm tired, I can't let that affect me. I have to because that patient at 4:00 deserves to have just as good a treatment as that patient when I was fresh at 8:00 in the morning. And I tell the staff, that's what we all got to do, because every patient deserves our best.
Yes.
We're working on their bodies. That's something, what's more valuable in life than your own body? Without it, you're not here. So we have to give them our all the time.
Speaking of that, being able to, constantly focus, you have a staff that can, provide some insights from some blind spots that you have, but you can never cover all your bases at all times. No. And if you try to, that axiom that we talk about in the Marine Corps, if you try to be strong everywhere, you're going to be weak everywhere. You can't spread yourself too thin. But that being said, what are some of those things that do concern you or keep you up at night that, as a business owner and a dentist, you're liable for? What, as a doctor, are those things?
The biggest thing for me that is quality of care.
Yes.
That's why we're here. That's the biggest thing that we have to keep an eye on. Is that there are things that do keep me up. Well, I try to keep myself busy so I don't, so I can sleep well. But sometimes I do stay up at night. And it's those times, even though those down times are predictable and I know they're coming, they're still not easy.
Yes.
They still weigh on your mind. So those slow turns or those sometimes keep me up at night. But what helps me stay comfortable is that we have systems in place, and I have systems that I personally do, like saving for rainy days. That help alleviate that, but it still stresses me out.
Yes.
And then, like I said, biggest thing outside is the quality of care, is making sure that everybody is doing things to the highest standard.
Yes. And speaking of those business owners that are just starting out, or those aspiring business owners, what would be, a 2 or 3 bullets as far as, to focus on when you're planning on starting out in that initial phase to be successful as a business owner?
Obviously, like we talked about earlier, you have to be cognizant of cash flow. Don't let things get away from you. That's a huge thing. I think a lot of people would say that. Second one would be, stay the course.
Right.
You're going to have struggles. You're going to have hard times. Don't be afraid to make a mistake.
Yes.
I've made mistakes over the years. Those mistakes are some of the most valuable things that I've done.
Right.
And because those help me gain better perspective.
You have to have exposure to risk.
You have to have exposure. You look at some, the best athletes in the world.
Right.
You ask them if they failed. Every single one of them, to a T, will tell you, I have failed.
But it's calculated risk.
It's calculated risk, exactly. And sometimes you take a calculated risk and you calculated wrong.
Yes.
And sometimes you take a calculated risk and you did right and you reap the benefits. But don't be afraid to fail. Don't be afraid to make a decision because you're afraid that you're going to fail. Take that calculated risk. But at the same time, don't sit there and just think about, okay, am I going to do this or not? Am I going to do this or not? You can overanalyze.
Yes.
And I used to do that. And as I've gotten busier, I've learned that I need to get as much information as I can in as short a time as possible and then make a decision.
Right. Because it can paralyze you.
Yeah, I can't belabor the point because I don't know if you've heard of it in your
in the Marines. Making a decision is very important.
Yeah.
You're never going to have perfect information.
Exactly, analysis paralysis is what I've heard, and and I've actually thought about that, how in the military
Generally works out worse the longer you wait to try to get that perfect information. The military is actually an Air Force fighter pilot that came up with this concept called the OODA loop, the observe, then you orient on it, and you decide, and you act, and it repeats itself.
Mm-hmm.
But if you can't do the D, if you can't decide, and then you can't act, in dental, you don't really have an adversary. Somebody's not coming at you.
No.
But in the military, somebody is. In the longer your delay in the decide and act, and if you're not doing all four, it's going to be much worse for you, and it's proven.
And that obviously on a whole different level because people's lives aren't at stake. But in business, it's that same thing. You have to make a decision because there's other businesses out there.
Yes.
And you talk about that decision. You get the information, make the decision. And I tell my staff, if you make the wrong decision, that's okay, because then we have a new situation that we have to analyze, and then we just adapt, and then we try to make the best decision from there. You're never going to be right 100% of the time.
Yes.
It's how you react when things don't go the right way and how you respond to that. That's what makes the difference.
Yes. One last thing that I was thinking of just last night, and that is a lot of people, they may be lactose intolerant and they may not be getting enough calcium in their diet. And as they age, how important is that to supplement with nutritional supplements to make sure that they're getting the calcium for strong bones, such as their teeth in their head?
Well, one of the nice things about teeth is once the teeth have formed, once the teeth have developed, they've got all the calcium they're going to get.
Okay.
Now, the calcium can affect the bone that's around the root of your teeth.
Okay.
People who have osteoporosis, they're more susceptible to gum disease. and to have bone or gum loss, because that process that is breaking down the bone or not allowing the bone to stay strong, that same process occurs in the bone around our roots.
Yes.
It's not as severe as you'll see like in someone's spine or something like that.
Right.
But that process is still there. So, it is important to keep those kinds of things under control, to keep your calcium levels under control. If you have osteoporosis, if you have those degenerative diseases, to keep those under control, because it does affect your teeth.
Have you seen people that were like a vegan that didn't eat any animal products to include dairy or anything that has those problems?
I haven't seen anything that really stood out to me,
Okay.
on that front. No. So.
Well, thank you very much, Dr.
Thank you.
Stephen Haake. He's an incredible dentist, and I don't just say that because, he is my dentist. I say that because he is my dentist and he does a phenomenal job. And as a business owner, it is very critical not just to focus on many different areas, but from the patient care and as a practice, he has these systems in place, and he is always staying ahead. And there's few in my business network that whether it's other business owners, people in charity, bigger businesses, I have not come across somebody that's practiced so many of these principles, and he does it effectively with discipline, and it really does result in outstanding patient care. So thank you very much again.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
To all my fellow grunts out there who in your youth felt it was your duty to protect us, I salute you. And thanks to the listeners of the Go Commando Show who labor on the farm, who are sweating on the construction site, putting forth your very best at the office. You are making a difference. Support the Go Commando Show in our pursuit of bringing you the highest quality professionals. Infiltrate the website at gocommandoshow.com, where you can view all of the podcasts and arm your team with incredible deals on health supplements, Commando clothing, and equipment. Every time that you get a good deal, it supports the show. What deals? When you purchase anything from the website, Amazon, healthcare supplements, you're covering our six. And to the ladies on the team, when you outfit yourself in the super sexy threads from Naked Zebra, and yes, I'm talking about in fuego, you are firing the sniper shot for our commandos. How else can you support? It's simple. You smash the follow and subscribe buttons on our social media. That is how you support us bringing great guests to talk about serious subjects, not the mainstream media's fake news. So thank you, and until our next show, stay in the attack and go Commando.